The state's Drinking Water Quality Council met today in Albany as members look for ways to ensure all communities have access to safe water supplies and as Hoosick Falls marks 2 years since its PFOA problem began. A new filtration system is in place for the village. Some residents, though, still remain skeptical. And that crisis, as you know, made people all over the state very concerned about what's in their water. Here to talk more about the hearing and the status of things in Hoosick Falls, we have Cathy Dawson. She's a resident of the village, Liz Moran from Environmental Advocates of New York, and Dr. Howard Freed. Thank you so much for being here. It's great to see all of you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Liz, we start with you. This was not the first hearing that this council has held, though it was the first in the Capital Region, and as such, the focus was different than the one that was held on Long Island.
Yeah, so how the Drinking Water Council set up their meetings, the first one on Long Island was focused on 1,4-dioxane, which is an emerging contaminant that's cropping up in many locations on the island. And today's focus was on PFOA and PFOS, which has cropped up now in Hoosick Falls, Petersburg, Newburgh, and of course PFCs are starting to crop up across the country. So we're very excited for the work of this Drinking Water Quality Council to begin. But that's exactly it. We have a lot to address, and we really feel that the Department of Health needs to get a head start and start regulating emerging contaminants and start requiring testing for emerging contaminants.
So you feel that, if I'm understanding you correctly, that there could be concurrent tracks that are occurring here, that the council could be taking testimony and getting information and deepening the knowledge that already exists, and the Cuomo administration could be using the existing knowledge to start taking steps to act to prevent what we know had happened in Hoosick Falls and Newburgh and elsewhere.
Absolutely, 100% correct. Federally, there's an unregulated contaminant monitoring rule. That's going to sound wonky, but basically what it is a list of chemicals that communities that have over 10,000 residents have to test for. That's actually how Newburgh found out that they have PFOS in their water. That's unlike Hoosick Falls, where a resident just had to take the initiative and test and find PFOA in their water. We really should just start there. That's a good place to start, and the council could always make recommendations, and we can change the regulations and modernize them and start testing for other things if needed.
So I know that I don't need to ask if you feel like the response was quick enough, because the answer I know is no.
Obviously no.
But you were at the council hearing today. What did you feel, what was your takeaway from that experience?
They kept harping on the 70 parts per trillion as the kind of acceptable level, and that's way too high. Vermont, which is 10 miles from my house, their level is 20. New Jersey, a couple states away, 13 or 14. So New York has to really lead the way and lower the acceptable standard.
So, doctor, from an episiotomy standard, I mean, New York, 70 parts per billion. Do I have that right? Billion? Trillion. Sorry, that does sound high. Is that a federal standard?
Well, for these chemicals that we don't know much about, New York State has a drinking water standard, a maximum contaminant level that they allow of 50,000 parts per trillion. But that was a level that DOH devised at the time of Love Canal. And it's as if the 35 intervening years, there had been no scientific research. As a result, in New York, we allowed 50,000 parts per trillion. Vermont allowed 20. New Jersey now allows 10. So the drinking water standards in New York, they're just too permissive.
Do you feel that, in fact, it would be safe, seems like sort of not the right adjective, but appropriate for this sort of two-track approach that Liz was discussing? In other words, that the council can be taking testimony as the administration is undertaking efforts that the council would then advise on instead of waiting until the full process is over?
They could certainly start working on it now if they wanted to.
What is the feeling in Hoosick Falls? I mentioned the filtration system is in place.
Personally, for me, I will not drink the tap water until there's a new source. I've gone out and bought one of those bottled water that hold the 5 gallons. I bought one of those. I've seen many of my neighbors have the cardboard boxes in their recycling bin, so I know a lot of my neighbors are not drinking the tap water. We're continuing to buy the bottled water.
Does it give you any solace that, in fact, this council is underway?
That's a good step. I appreciate all the work they're doing, and yeah.
That skepticism is, if I recall correctly, is also prevalent or present rather, in Newburgh, where people are about to leave the alternate water source and go back to their original source, which was contaminated, but now is contaminant-free, but people don't believe it. I mean, you can't really blame people for being concerned.
Yeah, and in Newburgh, it's actually quite complex because it's a very developed watershed. So now they're concerned, what else is in there? We know that PFOS is in there, we know how it got there, but what else are other companies and what else is the Department of Defense using that maybe we don't know about? So I think they're very rightfully concerned that they want to know what's in their water before they go back to drinking
So
it.
different from what's going on in Hoosick Falls is not concerned about new contamination, but rather the breadth of old contamination, whereas
correct.
Newburgh is concerned about, well, okay, you know, we isolated this particular problem, but since there is so much development there, a lot more could be going on.
Yeah, and I think, correct me if I'm mistaken, Kathy, but I think that in Hoosick Falls there's definitely been concerns about other PFCs and what's being used now.
Right.
That's always the next concern. What's the replacement substance for PFOA? And is that just as concerning for our health as PFOA has been?
Well, it seems to me the last time we spoke, Doctor, you and Judith Enck and a professor from Vermont had undertaken this study that you were sending out these surveys and asking people to, a very basic survey, and asking people to reply regarding their health concerns and problems, and then you were going to collate that information and come to some conclusions. Then the state subsequently announced on the very same day, oddly, the same sort of
Very
undertaking, which was interesting. So first, I'm interested in where you are with that, but also, you know, it seems that what we're doing is just constantly playing catch up. And is it possible for us to even get in front of this issue with so many new contaminants coming online?
Well, we can't really control the future, and there's a lot of contaminated world out there. All the air we breathe is trace contaminated. And the water that most of us drink has trace contamination. That's the world we live in. It's not pristine. We gave up on pristine environment a long time ago. So in Hoosick Falls, I wouldn't call it a study or survey. Really, it's a questionnaire. We're trying to get feedback on the way the people of Hoosick Falls feel and see what has been going on.
And that's,
We're still in data collection.
you're still in collection. And are people participating, do you know, anecdotally? Or?
I believe approximately 305 responses have been received so far. But
Yeah, that's pretty
which
good.
is a start. It's a
Yeah,
start.
it's a start. You know, we're coming into a new legislative session, so we're going to be focused on additional water quality efforts that statutorily could be made, or via perhaps executive order, what the governor might put in his budget, et cetera. I know there was a big win from a financial standpoint this past budget cycle, but we're going into a fiscal difficulty, coming in with a multi-billion-dollar deficit. What is it that you're hoping for out of the next session, Liz?
Well, we've discussed this so many times on this show that water needs in New York State are absolutely tremendous. There was a huge headway made last year, and we have to continue to build on this progress, because what we're talking about here is public health.
Right.
We're talking about ensuring New Yorkers that the water coming from their tap isn't going to make them sick. We're talking about ensuring that the water they recreate, that their local economies rely on to be safe, is safe for people to be in. So when you talk about it in that lens, it's very clear that we have to continue making needed investments to make sure that that's assured for all New Yorkers. Water infrastructure needs alone have been estimated at $80 billion over the next 20 years. And that's not including what will be needed to make sure that communities like Hoosick Falls and other small communities have resources they need to test for emerging contaminants.
What is the timeline for the council?
I don't know if that's been determined, and I think that's really why we feel it's very important for the Department of Health to get going. One of the big wins this past year was the fact that the Department of Health has the authority to create an emerging contaminant list for New York and can require all communities in New York State, regardless of size, to test for that list. It's time to get started. We shouldn't have New Yorkers wondering what's in their water anymore.
Kathy, are members of the public being given an opportunity to testify at these public hearings, or is that not what this is about?
They have, yes.
They have. Did you?
Yes, I did.
And did you feel like you were heard?
Well, it's too soon to tell. One of the things I said is I touched on the 70 parts per trillion, and that's not enough. And New York State motto, that sounds corny, but it's Excelsior,
Yep.
which we want to lead the way. I moved to New York when I was in my 20s, loving upstate New York, and I want to continue to love upstate New York.
Doctor, also before I let you go, what's the timeline for your study?
Well, we're still gathering data, and after we complete the data, it won't be long. It might be only 60 days before we can report out to the public.
Well, we're very interested in finding out what it is that you learn. And of course, we'll continue to keep tabs on all of this. And I thank all of you for your time and your continued effort and staying on top of it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.